Congressman Donalds, great to have you with us.
It's good to be here.
Boy, I tell you what, talk about a life story. You got a life story. Let's start in the beginning. Single mom, I mean, you tell the story. You know it. You lived it.
Yeah, I better. No, listen, we grew up in Brooklyn, New York. My mom did everything. You know, it was tough. You know, my mother, she has 3 children. I'm the middle child. My parents never married. Just didn't come together, whatever happened between my parents. But my mom just did everything that she could. She really believed in me, believed in really my abilities, thought education was going to be key for my success. And so for her, there was no stone that was to be left unturned for me to be successful in life. And so, you know, the foundation of what I guess my life has turned into, it starts with my mom. Yeah. You know, my mom she laid a great foundation, a no excuses foundation. Like, that's her. She's no excuses, dot your I's, cross your T's. Nothing's going to be easy, so you just really have to work hard every single day and really be committed to the work.
But she had to get you out of the public schools, right? Yeah. That was the deal. And that's where your grandmother comes in too, right? As it relates to schooling and getting to a private school that would be obviously a little hefty here in price. Yeah,
my grandmother stepped in. When my mom lost her job, my grandmother stepped in and helped pay the tuition. And that was tough. I remember having to ask my grandmother directly if she could do it.
Is that right?
I did.
How
I asked her. I was in the 8th grade, so probably 13. Oh, wow. And, you know, I had to go to my grandmother, ask her for help, you know, my mom and I. And, I mean, it's the first thing you learn kind of in life. The worst thing that could happen is somebody tells you no, you know. But my grandmother was definitely a part of that, a part of, you know, my story. And so forever thankful for her and the sacrifices she made on behalf of me. Got through high school, and not got through, like, you know, obviously did well in high school, you know, athlete, played sports, went to school, did all that stuff. And then came a decision to go to college, and where was I gonna go? I applied to 5 different colleges, got into all of them. But I got a letter from FAMU in Tallahassee, and it was about the School of Business and Industry, where you can get your bachelor's and your master's in 5 years. So I made the decision that I was gonna go to Tallahassee, go to FAMU. And then that's when Florida began. Wow.
Let me ask you a little bit about, let me go back for a second, because you go into a private school, and so at that point, as I fast forward to today, school choice, very important to you. It's like the past and the present and kind of combining together to kind of see where you were and what you're fighting for today.
My mom was a school choice mom before it was a thing, and I think most people don't really know, but my grandmother was a public school teacher. My mother taught public school, became a school administrator. My younger sister, she taught in public schools for a while, doesn't anymore. My older sister, she was a speech pathologist in school settings and stuff like that. So in my family, public education was just a core function of what a lot of people did in my family. So for my mom to make the decision to pull me out of public school, it was really because she just saw that I wasn't getting what I needed. And so, yeah, fast forward to today, where in Florida, we now have universal parental scholarships. Texas just passed it. Other states are looking at it. Really, it's the civil rights issue of our time, making sure that children, no matter the income level of their parents, have access to every academic environment.
What about strong fatherhood as well? I would think that's something that has to resonate with you. I don't know what that relationship, was there ever a relationship with your dad, or that was just something that was not part of the equation?
Not really. It came later. It came later in life. You know, look, my dad wasn't there, and that's really something between my mother and my father.
Right.
Not my business. Especially now, being a husband, being a father, what you realize as an adult is that so many different things were going on, not just the kids. And so, you know, when I was when I was maturing and becoming an adult, I always wanted to be married, always wanted to be there in the lives of my sons or my kids. Didn't realize I was gonna have all boys, but, you know, God knew better. He knew I didn't need daughters. It worked out. It worked out for me, but I just always wanted to be there. Always wanted to be there and really, you know, be consequential in their lives. It was important to me, really, I think mostly because I didn't grow up with my dad. And I think that, you know, there were lessons I had to learn the hard way, or I had to learn a different way, because I wasn't able to like lean on that male role model early on in my life. But fortunate for me, God filled that void.
Amen. And we're going to get to God in just one second. But before God, you know, you had some run-ins, obviously, not to litigate all that, but there were some issues at Florida A&M. And, you know, what lessons did that teach you? And that kind of transitions me into that faith story, because that's coming next, and that's the best part of the story.
I mean, look, I was, you know, 18, young, think you know everything.
I hear you.
And, you know, just made some mistakes. You know, and it's things where I'm not proud of it, never have been proud of those mistakes, but in life, it's not really how you fall down, it's how you get up. And I remember I'm 20 years old, I've been arrested for the second time, I'm spiraling at 20. And I remember it clear as day. I remember looking up and saying to myself, like, whatever happens next, I'm never gonna be in this position again. And so then I think there is a level of maturity and accountability for yourself that you really start to instill, where it's day by day decision making, minute by minute decision making, and really, you know, from that time it was purposing in my life to be a better man the next day than I was the day before. I always tell my kids, I tell them now, and any kid that I ever mentored, whether it was in sports or when I was a youth leader, is that you don't end up at bad decisions. It just doesn't happen one day. It's very rare. Typically, it's a series of decisions that gets you into a spot where you end up making a bad one. So it's really a day in, day out process, really being mindful of the choices that you're making and why. And you know, always striving to be better. Yeah,
and here you are, what, about 21 or so, and you've got this great faith story. What is it, this Cracker Barrel in Tennessee, Tallahassee? Yeah. What in the world? Yeah. You got to tell this story.
So, you know, after I got arrested the second time, you know, I started going to church. My girlfriend at the time, who ended up becoming my girlfriend again, who I ended up marrying, she was starting to go to church. And, you know, I would talk to her, and she said, you should just come with me, so I would. And it's crazy, especially the first time you start going into church, you feel like the pastor knows your story, like he's talking directly to you. Yes, and I'm thinking like, who called the pastor? Who called my mom? You know, like who called my mom? Who called my friends? And started relaying the story. And I think that's really where I started meeting the Holy Spirit, really seeing God and who he is, and really not just the blessings he has for you, but really the guidance he has for you. And so I was working at Cracker Barrel at the time, and it was the summer of 2001. And there was a couple of, seemed like once a month, there was a lady who would come in. One lady had written a story on the road, and she looks up at me wearing the big brown apron with, you know, with my name on it. And she goes, "Oh, you're Byron. I just was praying in the car and wrote a story about you." So totally, I don't even tell this part of it because it's so long. I remember, you know, she just said, you know, God's just saying he's praying for you. God's saying, you know, he's with you. Don't leave him. Keep praying. Stay in it. When I gave my life to Christ, it was September 2nd, 2001. I was waiting on this table. It was like a revival. These whole tables, like 13 of them. And, you know, when you're in Cracker Barrel, the last thing you want is a big table. Like, you want like 4 and 5. You don't want 13 because it takes up your whole section. But I'm there, and I'm waiting on this whole table. And you know, the Lord was really dealing with me at that time. And I waited on them and did all the stuff. And, you know, I go back, I cash them out, I go back to the server line, I'm rolling silverware, and I'm gone. Like, I'm on the server line, I'm rolling silverware, but I'm not there. And, you know, people kept coming up to me, they're like, "Byron, you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm just thinking." And so, you know, the Lord spoke to me. It was like, "Stop running from me." And so, like, it knocked me back. So I went out to find the table, and they were all gone. And I could see through the windows that they were getting on their bus. So I walked out, my manager's like, "Where are you going?" I said, "I need a second." I walk out there, the last lady's getting on the bus, and she goes, "Young man, you okay?" And I go, "No, ma'am, I'm not okay." And she goes, "What?" And I go, "The Lord's telling me to stop running." Yeah. I still get emotional about it. And so there was a little tree that was right there next to where their van was pulled up, and they all came pouring out the bus. I mean, they just came from a revival, so they're like, "Oh, praise the Lord, we know we got another one." And so they pour out the bus, and they all pray over me, and I gave my life to Christ in the parking lot, Cracker Barrel.
You got saved at Cracker Barrel?
Sure did. That's not a promotional for the company, but yeah.
Yeah, you have to do the disclaimer. That's just a wild story, and look at what God has done since the Cracker Barrel incident. Here you are. And we can get into what your potential future plans are, actually your current future plans, which hopefully you're going to be running for, or you are running for Florida governor. But we'll get to that in a moment. But then you get to the Tea Party movement in 2010. We're fast forwarding quite a few years here, but in 2010, and there you are in that red pickup, and you're doing your oh yeah, we'll get some video of that somewhere in the piece. But the red pickup, and just reading what was The Law, I believe, by this French economist, I believe.
Yeah,
and
Frederick Bastiat.
Yeah.
So what happened was, I mean, I was just living my life before that time. You know, I was in my career. I had 2 sons at the time. You know, I was a youth leader. I was a coach, just doing normal things. And then I was working, you know, in insurance. And during the financial collapse, my company asked me to do research. So when I was doing all my research, I realized that, you know, I had many disagreements with how the federal government was being operated. Tea Party rallies started all over the country. I went to one in 2009. That was like a year before the speech. I went to one, met a lady there who's one of my longest supporters. And she recommended The Law by Frederick Bastiat. Like, you should read this book. It's a great book. So I read it. And it really spoke to me because it was about the purpose of the law, not modern politics, you know, not Republicans versus Democrats or anything like that. It was about the purpose of law. And that next year, I found myself just consuming anything about politics and political philosophy. I was a Toastmaster also. I was trying to work on my speaking skills from my career because I knew I wanted to go into sales and really expand my abilities in my career. And they tell you in Toastmasters to just write your speeches about what you're passionate about. And I was passionate about politics. I was really like just feasting on all this information. And I gave a speech in the Advance Club I was a part of, and it was a Tea Party rally that October. And I got a copy of the speech. I think it was like a week before the rally. And I watched the speech, and I go, well, wow, that was pretty good. And, you know, the guy, Barry Willoughby, God rest his soul, who was the head of the Naples Tea Party at the time, I sent him the speech. And I said, if you're ever looking for a speaker at any time, just please let me know. I'd love to come out and help. He wrote me back in like 2 hours and said, I don't have any more time in October, for the October rally, but I'm going to give you 5 minutes anyway. He said, so he gave me 5 minutes. And that was the 5 minutes in the back of that pickup truck in 2010 that I gave the speech. Story. That's the story.
So to me, and I don't know how you feel about this, everybody talks about MAGA, MAGA, MAGA now, but before MAGA there was the Tea Party. Yeah. I mean, it seems to me like the Tea Party was the prequel, or maybe the, whatever, part 1, and now we're in MAGA part 2. I don't know what's coming next, but do you see it that way?
Yeah. I think a lot of the people who are now, I guess, in the MAGA movement, they were in the Tea Party movement, you know, more than a decade ago, almost 15 years ago now. And I think it's the same group of people. You have conservatives. You have people who, whether it's fiscal conservatism, social conservatism, people who just are frustrated when the country's not working correctly, but they want concrete solutions. They believe in the Constitution. They believe in the rule of law. And what you find is people all kind of have their niche of the thing that is their driver. But I think what the MAGA movement has done, it married conservatism, which is whether fiscal or social, with populism. And that's really the MAGA movement. I think what it was able to really grab was where the Tea Party was trying to get to, but there just was never a focal point to the Tea Party, which is part of its beauty, but also part of the things that didn't work out. And then along comes Donald Trump and the America First MAGA movement, and now there was a center to the movement. So you could bring in people who just weren't dyed-in-the-wool conservatives who had read Mises or John Locke or Montesquieu, or were subscribed, who read Free to Choose by Milton Friedman, or were reading National Review or any of that stuff by Bill Buckley or any of that stuff, with people who were just passionate about the country. They generally know the right direction. You know, they're not a nuts and bolts conservative, but they know what it means to put the country first and to put America first. And I think the MAGA movement really combined and consolidated those two portions of the American electorate into what you see today.
It's fascinating. The whole thing about race in America, and it makes me think of the Tea Party, you know, oh, the Tea Party, they're racist, right? MAGA, they're racist. It feels like a very lazy narrative, and I'm curious to get your view, because you've seen it up close from that red pickup truck, if you will, to today, what's going on with MAGA. Seems to me that the common denominator here is common sense and getting back to a Judeo-Christian view of the country.
Well, I think first of all, to your question, I think the attacks trying to use race is really because there is no other argument for how you deal with a political party or a political movement that wants to get away from leftism, progressivism, socialism, Marxism, however you want to call it. They don't have a good argument for why people want to just do sensible things like follow the rule of law, sound budgets, controlling your borders, having just social standards of how families and how communities operate, which are at its core really just common sense principles. The stuff that your parents teach you at the kitchen table, your grandparents teach you if your parents don't teach you. Like somebody along the way tells you this is just basic stuff that there should be no disagreement on, but of course there's disagreements from the left. So the weapon they've used, I think, really against Republicans and against conservatives in the past is that because predominantly black people in America vote Democrat and vote left-leaning, that if you're against that, then somehow that's racist. But I think even that argument has started to really fall apart because now you have younger black people in the country who are saying, you know what, it's not racist for me to be able to keep more of my money. It's not racist to want to secure the border.
Why the change on that, do you think? Because we saw that in the 2024 election. The demos showed that, especially black voters under 50 especially, there seemed to be a difference. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think younger black voters, I think they're taking their politics, they look at their politics differently. I think for black voters over the age of 50, their politics, and to some degree, was really shaped by the civil rights era. But in today's America, their politics is much more shaped by economics and shaped by, you know, the realities we see. Like take Chicago. Like you have black people in Chicago who are like vehement supporters of Donald Trump and the MAGA movement because of illegal immigration. Because they've seen what illegal immigration has done to their communities in Chicago or in New York, and they're saying, I don't want any parts of that. Or it's as simple as, you know, when Donald Trump was president the first time, people were doing very well economically. And then the Biden administration came in, they said they were going to do things better, but it didn't work out that way, not even close. Things got a lot worse. So people now, 35, I have a child, I have two, they're gauging the last two administrations and saying, you know what, I'm going to go with Trump. At least the country was running better. The news media was all over the place. They were complaining about everything. The Democrats were complaining about everything. But in my life, day in, day out, things were better. And I think that's why you saw that move. And I'll tell you, I think that move is going to continue.
Have you had what's the pushback that you've had for being the air quote, black conservative? Like what has that journey been like for you?
I'll tell you, you better have the courage of your convictions. You better know what you're talking about. It's funny. I was looking at my Facebook the other day, and I went through the memories. I try to go through the memories now because I get to see pictures of my kids when they were a lot smaller, and I reminisce too on that stuff. And I found an old debate on Facebook. Yeah, I used to go in Facebook debate a long time ago. And it was funny. It's like 2009, 2010. And in this one, like I was debating my sister and debating one of the guys I knew from college and some other stuff. If you're going to be a black conservative, you really have to have the courage of your convictions. You really have to know your policy, know your philosophy, and be able to stick to it.
Because they're coming for you.
Because everybody's coming for you. The worst offenders are white liberals. You see, I think even black people who might vote Democrat, black people who vote Democrat, at the end of the day, we're black. They may not agree with me. Some of them might try to be nasty and call me names that they would never, one, they would never call me to my face. Two, if they knew me, they would never call me. But it's easy to do it from afar, right? It's easy to do it in chat rooms and comment sections of ads and stuff like that. But white liberals, when it comes to them, I'm an anathema to them. Because for what I stand for, and not just me, Tim Scott, Ben Carson, Wesley Hunt, John James, so many of us. What we stand for is a complete revulsion of their politics. See, white liberals, their politics are based upon the fact that only their solutions are going to bring salvation or bring economic parity to the black community. And if you don't stand with them, then you're standing with evil. So I will tell you, when it comes to black voters, we'll be fine. We'll figure it out. Some will decide to give me an opportunity. Some will decide to stand with me. Some will say, no, I'm not a Republican, so I'm not with them. Some will say, you know, stupid things that I'm not even going to recite. But white liberals, I don't even try convincing them.
Does that have to do with cultural Marxism, the Marxism that they're basically pushing? That gets into CRT and DEI?
Right, it does. Because, again, if you have black people espouse free markets, Austrian school economics, merit, that flies in the face of the white liberal agenda of cultural Marxism. The two cannot coincide. The two do not mix. It's oil and water. And so I think for white liberals, that's why they have a higher level of animus towards black conservatives. And that's not being racial. No. That's just being realistic. That's what it is. Realistic,
yeah, for sure. So let me ask you a little bit about you pushing back against the Joy Reids of the world, who, by the way, Joy Reid is gone. I mean, not gone, but you know what I mean. I mean, she's no longer there. Not on TV. But you go in, Bill Maher.
So
Bill Maher. Yeah, so sad. But Bill Maher, which is a whole different red pill situation. But the point is that you go into places where you want to have that discussion. What's driving you to do that? Because some folks don't really want to do that, but you seem to challenge. You like to, not only the challenge, but you seem to think that's clearly important. But I'll let you say what you think.
I think that politics, at the end of the day, is always about the battlefield of ideas. And the thing that frustrated me as a Republican, the thing that frustrated me with Republicans, is that we would only do the easy message or the comfortable message, where you would only go into a place where you feel that your message is going to be received. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. All that tells me is that you can recite lines that somebody gave you. But can you go into the lion's den? Can you take your game on the road? We were talking about basketball off screen. Sure. The toughest thing in any sport is taking your game on the road.
In the playoffs.
In the playoffs. How are you going to hold up when you know the crowd is not with you? And you still have to be able to deliver. Can you be booed and still continue? Can people shake you? And so I think that if you're going to go convince voters in our country, whether they're independent voters or soft Democrat voters, and I mean, these are voters who, quite frankly, do not ingest politics the way they might ingest the thing that they love, whether that's church, whether that's sports, whether that's cars, whether it's vacations, whether it's music. They're genius in the thing that they love, but they don't ingest politics. So when it comes to public policy, they don't really think it through, they just think about it. Can you communicate to those people? They don't go into Republican lunches. They don't go to Lincoln Reagan dinners. They might watch some Fox, they might watch some CNN, they might watch some MSNBC, they might listen to a podcast, they might, they get their information so many different ways. Yeah. Are you going to communicate to them? And so my mission when I got to Congress was, I'm going to communicate with them. So whether it was Joy Reid, whether it was whoever else, CNN, MSNBC, Breakfast Club, any podcast, my view of it was, I'm going to use this opportunity and this time to take the game on the road. And if I can go take it on the road, and listen, you're never going to win everybody. Right. I think the people might choose in this business to not go into hostile areas because they feel like, well, I didn't win everybody. Well, guess what? You never win everybody. Right. I don't have to win everybody. I just have to win enough.
Makes sense. Let me ask you, not that I want you to dissect the Democrat Party, because I'll deal with that with a Democrat consultant. However, which that could be a psychological shrink situation. But anyhow, that's a whole nother issue. But I guess my bottom line question is, do you believe the Democrat Party has gotten away from God? Have they left God out of the equation here? How do you see God in the Democrat Party?
I definitely think that they're not even think, I know, that there are people who are Democrats who believe in God. They believe in Jesus, 100%. I think their politics and their party has decided that they know more and have more wisdom than common sense parables from the Bible, like, you know, like the parable of the talents. Like, people have to use the abilities that they are given. And the Bible's clear. If you don't use the talents you're given, God will take them from you and give them to somebody else. Well, how does that jibe with Democrat philosophy? Democrat philosophy says, well, if you don't have something, then we're going to grab it from somebody else to give it to you. But that's not what the Bible says. The Bible's clear. If you want to eat, you have to put your hand to the plow. The Bible's very clear on this. The parable of talents, I love that one, because it's the man that had 10 talents, and he actually used the 10 that God had given him. He didn't say, oh, well, let me take 3 of yours and give it to the person who has none because he buried it in the ground. He's saying, no, you buried what I gave you in the ground. Well, why don't you go ahead and give that to me? And I'm going to give it to him because at least the guy who has the most actually used the talents that I gave you. And so, again, I think what the issue for Democrats is their political views just differ, in my view, very greatly from what the Bible says. And I think there are Democrats who will say, well, Byron, you're wrong, because God says that to make sure that you are looking out for the poor and you take care of the least of these. And I totally understand that. I agree with that. You should look out for the least of these. But that's because you choose, out of the goodness of your heart, the love in your heart for your fellow man, to do so. That doesn't mean you have the ability to take from another man to give to another. And those are two different things.
Yeah. The power of community, for sure. Yeah, which Alexis de Tocqueville talked about in the 1800s, for sure. Let me ask you a little bit about spiritual revival in this country. We've seen a lot of stuff going on at campuses around the country. I mean, what's your take on what's happening across this country? Because it does feel like an America 180 situation, at least before Trump, came into office. But things were just getting crazy helter-skelter from a common sense standpoint. 94 genders, 107 the next day. It was like, what's going on? How do you see this spiritually? Do you believe there is spiritual revival going on in America? Do you believe a spiritual awakening is needed in America?
I think in part. I think what we're really seeing in America is people are looking for truth. We're at this point in American history where, and I watch my sons do it, you can have everything is on demand. My sons don't even watch TV anymore. They watch their phones. So, like, imagine this. I was a kid, grew up in the inner city. Growing up as an inner city kid, you're thinking, man, if I could have a 75-inch TV in my living room, this is great. I could watch everything on the TV. For my sons, they barely touch that thing. Like, I touch it. They're in their rooms on their phones, just sitting looking at the thing like this and picking out whatever they want. But for young people today in America, just about everything is at your fingertips, even if you're poor. Even if you're poor in America today, so much is at your fingertips, more than it was when I was growing up, or when my mother was growing up, or when my grandmother was growing up. It's not even close. So what happens to the human condition when just about everything is at your fingertips all the time? And by the way, the next generation is going to make this one look scary, how much is just at your fingertips in real time. But at the end of the day, that doesn't change the human condition. It doesn't change the heart condition. We are made to believe in something. And I think that, to not get off of spiritualness, but if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of need, when you basically take care of your baseline needs, then you start having higher desires. At the end of the day, the highest desire of all is to have purpose in what you're doing day in, day out. And as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing that that fills that void of purpose, like God.
Speaking about purpose, day in and day out, let's just move to some of the news of the day, which is
Sure.
President Trump in the 100 days, obviously. It's here as we speak. It'll be tomorrow on Tuesday. Well, your kind of reaction overall, I mean, I guess it depends who you ask, right? I mean, MAGA's loving every minute of it,
Yeah.
but the country, the polling shows that maybe more of an incomplete as it relates to the economy. Immigration, you know, A+ it seems, but on the economy, with the tariffs, who knows how it's going to go. What's your view in terms of kind of report card-ish economy-wise right now?
Look, I think on the economy, it's still an A. You have to understand that I think what the media and the Democrats are now clinging to is what happened in the stock market a couple of weeks ago. You know, the president, through tariff policy, which he campaigned on, he's trying to reset global trade. Well, that's not simple. You know, it's not just you don't just give a speech and it happens. That's a lot of work that goes into it. But we have to understand as a country that these trade deals that we've been signing for decades in America, number one, they were terrible. Number two, we didn't even enforce them. So other countries were taking advantage of our businesses because we didn't enforce them. You go ask small business owners, even large business owners, they would tell you what I'm telling you. Now, the process of getting that all cleaned up and put back on an even playing field is tough. It is not easy. If it was easy, we would have done it already. But this is the problem in this town and frankly, too many state capitals. You have politicians who aren't going to do the hard work. They're going to do something quick that sounds good, but then there's no follow-up on the back end. And so I think when it comes to the economy, look at every other measure. Inflation is going down. Gas prices are down. Egg prices down. Job growth slightly up. We're going through trade issues right now. We will resolve them. I think you get past that stuff, you're going to see the American economy really take off. On Capitol Hill, we have tax policy, deregulation policy, energy policy. All those things are going to be additives to our economy. So even though right now people were looking at the stock market the last couple of weeks and then you see all the articles, oh, the tariffs aren't working, what's going on, are they messaging, blah, blah, blah. I would say, let the president cook. Let him cook. When the meal is done, then make a decision on whether it was good or not. But I'll tell you this, it's already significantly better than it was with the previous administration because that economy was a disaster.
The MAGA movement will say, we love the executive orders, but they're executive orders. Yeah. Where does Congress come in? How much of this can get codified into law? And I mean, I say, how much of this? What is this? I mean, this is like so many of these executive orders. I mean, you know, how does some of this actually become sustainable rather than potentially revoked in 4 years?
Well, the number one way you do it is you have to get Democrat senators to play ball. So the real question is, are there 7 Democrat senators who are going to take, you know, half of the Trump executive orders and say, you know what, that actually makes sense. Let's do that. Let's put that into law. We'll see how they choose to operate politically. At the end of the day, for voters, whether you're MAGA, whether you're independent, whether you're a traditional Republican, whether you're a traditional Democrat, or you're, you know, someone on the Democratic left, at the end of the day, how you sustain policy is that people have to choose it. They got to choose it at the ballot box every 2 years, every 4 years. If you don't do that, then unfortunately what we have is this seesaw in American politics we've really had over the last 30 years. And as long as we continue to have this seesaw, it's only going to be to the detriment of the United States of America. In short, the American people are going to have to choose. Which way do you want our country to go? We've seen what the Democrats really want to do. That was the Biden administration. We've seen that. Now, Donald Trump's coming in saying, we're going to reverse all that, and then there's some things we have to fix, i.e., the trade and tariffs. And so to fix all these things, yeah, it's going to be a little bumpy. But that's how it is with anything in life. When you first go to the gym and work out, man, them first couple of weeks are not good. You are struggling, especially when you get sore. After the first 2 workouts, you get second day, third day, fourth day soreness. It is not fun. But we know that the payoff is in the future, so you begin to do that hard work early.
Budget reconciliation. Obviously, this is just changing. You know, who knows? We could talk in an hour and it could be different. Who the heck knows? But look, the parameters of this, or at least the guideline, the outline. I mean, the Senate, you guys want to do what, 1.3 trillion cuts potentially?
1.5.
1.5, my bad, 1.5.
And I have colleagues who want to do 2 trillion.
Okay, 2 trillion, all right, whatever. Between there, and then the Senate's like, yeah, not in a million years. I mean, that's not going to, they don't want to do any of that. So where does the rubber meet the road? And is that, what, are you going to meet halfway? I mean, how's that work?
Look, I've been very clear with the Senate and really with House leadership and with the White House. You got to cut 1.5 trillion. There are members of the Senate that want to cut 2.5 trillion. There's members of the House that want to cut 2.5 trillion. There are members in both chambers who would say, oh, we can't cut, let's do that later. The problem is there is no later. There is now. This town has been kicking the can down the road for decades. You can't do it anymore. We just spent $7 trillion as a country that raises $5 trillion in taxes. And by the way, we've never raised $5 trillion in taxes in America. We did last year. We have to cut spending. There isn't a tax increase alive that can fill the gap. And so the reality is that if we're responsible with the money of the American people, we will be rewarded for that responsibility. If we try to play cheap politics, which has been done time and time again, we're only going to have to pay the piper in a bigger way down the road. So my message to my colleagues in the Senate who are got issues, they have trepidations about cutting spending, is that it will be cut for us one way or the other. Right. Either we cut it now and we do the tough things now and slowly build our way. And by the way, cutting $1.5 trillion, to be blunt, isn't even that hard. It's just that this town has never cut spending, ever. This town has never cut spending. It doesn't even know how to do it. So I used the working out analogy before. Cutting spending for this town is taking a guy that's never lifted a weight and telling him go bench press 225. They don't even know where to begin. They don't even know how to put the plates on the bar, let alone go ahead and pump the iron. So we have to start now. And this is going to be, in my view, and I don't want to speak for anybody else, not speaking for the president, not speaking for anybody. I think we have to start now. Washington is going to have to do further things in the future to get the fiscal house in order for the nation. If we don't do it, our borrowing rates are going to go up, which is going to make interest rates higher for small businesses, higher for families. And I know people were concerned about tariffs, but what's coming will pale in comparison to tariffs. I think it's important to level set this. So cutting that money now, I think is important. Let us get on the right footing. Give everybody some breathing room so we can be thoughtful about some of the other adjustments in the future.
You want to say a prayer for Mike Johnson? Because he has to corral this caucus. You think 1.5 trillion can get through this caucus?
Yeah, I do.
Do you?
I do think 1.5 can get through. Because people will hear the number, but it's really about the details. You see, I've been in those rooms with the speaker. I've been in those rooms. I've met with just about every member of our conference, what their issues are, what the New York delegation's thinking about, what the California delegation's thinking about, what the Indiana delegation is thinking about, what the Iowa delegation is thinking about. I've talked to them all. I kind of know all their issues. I know the menu that's available. Can we get to 1.5 trillion? I think we can. Can the Senate do that? I think they can. Because at the end of the day, let's play this out. At 200 days, if we have secured the border, started deporting illegal aliens, especially criminally illegal aliens, extended tax cut policy, brought in no tax on tips, overtime, Social Security, 100% expensing on capital expenditures, cutting regulations, opening up the country from an energy perspective, raise the nation's debt ceilings, actually have not just a ceasefire in Ukraine, but a permanent one, and bring the hostages home from Gaza, if that can be what Donald Trump can say at day 200, that has been the most successful presidential administration in 30 years, easily, probably longer.
Very interesting. By the way, of course, Democrats are going to say that you all want to throw Granny from the cliff. You know the deal with the Social Security. Why do they keep saying, well, I shouldn't say why they keep saying that. I know why they say it, but what's the reality? Because President Trump keeps saying we're not touching Social Security.
Right.
And in Medicaid, what's the deal there? Because are we really talking about waste, fraud, and abuse, or is it about caps and spending limits or spending levels and all of that type of stuff?
No, we're talking about waste, fraud, and abuse. Okay. And in Medicaid, and some in Medicare, and the details aren't even out on that.
Okay.
Nobody's being kicked off the rolls, except if you're an illegal alien, you shouldn't be getting public benefits anyway. Right. Social Security can't even be touched in budget reconciliation. It's against the Budget Control Act of '74. So it's not allowed in there. So the Democrats say this stuff, but they don't even talk about the rules that, quite frankly, Senate Democrats set up in the 70s when they were in charge. So they should actually follow their own rules. At the end of the day, when you talk about the big programs in our country, Social Security and Medicare, they both go insolvent in about 8 years. Federal law says that when they go insolvent, there is an automatic benefit cut because you have to rebalance the programs. Okay. Today, the math says that if they go insolvent, there'll be a 22% benefit cut across the board for every senior in the United States. I'm one of the members that says, let's not get to that point. Okay? Let's not get that far. Are we going to touch those programs now? No, we're not. The president's clear. We're going to do other things. Medicaid, a bunch of waste is in that program. Yes, we should cut out the waste. We should try to save money so that seniors and people who actually need assistance are getting that assistance, not fraudsters taking advantage of the fact that the federal government doesn't even know how to do simple things like run inventory controls. Like that's the problem at the federal level, right? We don't do the simple things right. So let's get the waste out. Let's find other places to cut. Let's take down the velocity of how much money we borrow, because every dollar we borrow costs us more money in the future, and it also decreases the purchasing power of the American dollar.
Yeah, and you said you lay all that out. You try to lay it out in a town hall, and of course that went viral. All the town, but give me a reaction about not just that event, but more about going into the Lion's Den. I say Lion's Den. I mean it's a district, right? I mean it's your district, but the point is like you're not afraid to take questions and take the heat, even though I don't know quite what the heat is, but people are agitated and maybe it's all organized by Soros. I don't know the deal, but the point is that there's some stuff out there.
Well, look, first I'll say, grassroots Democrats are active and organized. They just got, they lost the presidential election pretty badly. They lost in epic fashion. So they're upset with their own party. They're upset with their own leadership. Obviously, they did not support President Trump. They don't like DOGE. They don't like these things. So they're coming out to town halls and they're yelling. We heard it from the leadership. They said, maybe we shouldn't do town halls. Right. But then I said, no, I'm doing it anyway. Because I'm not going to be intimidated by your yelling. If you want to have a constructive conversation, let's do that. I'm all for that. But if you want to yell, there's the door. You can get out and then we'll continue. And that's actually what happened at my town hall. But even still, when we were going through, especially DOGE and deportations, when you just mentioned that Elon was running DOGE because he was hired by the president to do this, they just yelled and booed and screamed. No concrete alternatives. And I said, do you think that we should find ways for the government to be efficient? No, don't touch anything. Well, folks, we're $36 trillion in debt. We're running $2 trillion annual deficits. Don't touch anything means let the country run off the cliff. We're not going to do that. Yeah. I didn't sign up to do that. Yeah, for sure. And I could be political and just tell everybody what they want to hear, but I'm not in this for politics. I'm in this to put the country in the right spot so it can be functional for my kids going into the future, my grandkids going into the future, because it's the best country in the world. It's not even close. You had a potential here, obviously, to make your way potentially to be a Speaker of the House one day, but you're running for, you got a couple votes already. I've had some.
You've had a couple of votes, but you're running for governor of Florida. Yeah. What was the reason behind that, the prayerful reason behind that? And what does the terrain look like? I guess we wait for Casey DeSantis on this.
Well, I mean, look, first I will tell you that, in my prayer life, what I always pray for my wife when we do that, it's about, God, if this is not for me, close that door. And if it's something that we should pursue, then leave the door open. And so in the steps towards, running for governor, the doors just kept staying open and other doors were closing. Do you want to go into the administration? Do you want to go into House leadership? Do you want to do all these other things? And those doors were closing. This door stayed open. So that's number one. Number two, look, Governor DeSantis' term's out. Florida needs another governor. We're gonna do that next year as a state. And if you look at my record, both in the state house and here in Congress, I have one of the most conservative records in the country. Florida is now the preeminent Republican state in the country. So a conservative should lead the state going into the future. I fit that bill. I have the record, I have the votes, I have the fights, I have the votes against my own party. I have all that stuff where you have to be willing to stand on your own and know what the right decision is to be made, and you press forward to get that done. Up here on Capitol Hill, you know, with my colleagues, you know, I've demonstrated my leadership, whether at the microphone or in the room trying to figure out how to negotiate and try to find the best deal to get done for the Republican conference. So when I talk to my colleagues around here, they're all like, man, we're actually excited for you. We think you're going to be a great governor. In terms of anybody else running, I'm not waiting for anybody. I have the support of President Trump. I have the support of Senator Scott. I have the support of most of the Republican congressional delegation, and we're picking up steam every single day. I've been crisscrossing the state nonstop for the last 6 weeks, except when I'm here doing my job here in Washington, and we're going to keep going, keep running hard. And so, you know, we'll see what happens with anybody else. But you know, when I get into these kind of competitions, campaigns, no stone. I'm like my mom in that way. No stone left unturned.
And basketball. Make sure about basketball. Now, speaking of basketball, as we wrap up here, what are some lessons? Because you love basketball. So what are some of the lessons that basketball you think has taught you in life? You talked about going on the road in the playoffs. That was a good one for sure. But like overall, what is it? Because I feel like in basketball, in any sport, you have to prepare. And I think that's a big part of it.
Two things come to mind. Okay. When I was a junior in high school, it was one of those practices where nothing was going right. And we were running suicide after suicide after suicide. My knee was hurting, my back was throbbing, my hamstrings were on fire. And I walked off the court. My teammate was cheering for me to come back. No, don't quit, come back. I just thought I was done. And I got into that locker room by myself. I don't think I've ever been that disgusted with myself because I gave up. And so from that point forward, I was 16 at the time. That point forward, I promised myself I would never quit on myself again. I'm not saying I was perfect, I was 16, but I would never quit on myself. So that's the number one lesson I learned from basketball is you can win or you can lose. I mean, you could win or you could fail, but you never lose. When you quit is when you lose. And so for me, you just work hard day in, day out. You don't sweat the small stuff. You don't worry about what people say about you, because the truth is most people don't know you anyway. Only a handful of people really know who you are. And as long as you know who you are, that's good enough. You keep going, you keep plowing ahead, you do the things that are important to you. Second big lesson I learned, our rival was Bishop Loughlin. And so, it like oh my gosh, because in these games with Bishop Loughlin, their court was smaller, right? But everybody sat on the edges of the court. So like say you're taking the ball out of bounds, this is the front row.
They're right on you.
Right on you. It's loud, they're yelling, they're cheering, they're booing you. Oh, wow. And so if you're not prepared, it's not gonna go well. My senior year didn't go well, we were terrible that year. But what I learned from that entire time, and when I learned coaching young kids in basketball and stuff like that is, if you're waiting to get to the game to show what you can do, you lost. It's in the preparation. It's all in the preparation. I had a friend come up to me one day. He goes, man, I think I want to get into politics. How'd you do it? And I said, you really want to know? And they go, yeah. And I said, people are looking at me now and they say, man, Byron does this, he does that. I want to go on TV. I want to go on Fox. I want to go here. I want to go here. The part nobody ever saw, except my family and a handful of friends, was 15 years ago. Speaking in the back of a pickup truck for 5 minutes, knocking doors when nobody knew who you were, serving in somebody else's campaign, kind of learning the ropes, reading about philosophy, doing Facebook debates that nobody was paying attention to. But all those things, all that work kind of led to where it is right now. And so for me, the lessons are You know, you have to put the work in consistently, you know. I'll give him credit. Anthony Edwards, after the Game 4 win in Minnesota, they interviewed him. They go, so what's next? He goes, back to the gym tomorrow. The work is what got me here.
That's a great mindset.
And that's how I am. Oh, we did something great? All right, back to work tomorrow.
What's next?
What's next is get back in the lab, keep working.
Yeah. Last question. You can take the guy to New York, but you can't really take New York out of the guy, so to speak. So you're a Florida guy. Now I get that. You're Florida true and true. Yeah. True and through. Through and true? Whatever. Anyhow, the point is you're a Florida guy. But what is that New York, Brooklyn DNA, back to the single mom, as we wrap up in this last question, what does that bring to the table? What sticks with you? What's that about, the life lesson there, and how you apply all of that to what you're doing today, the New York in you, if you will?
I joked with some old friends. They asked me what prepared me for politics. I said growing up in New York.
How so?
You just gotta be street smart. You gotta be able to see around corners. You gotta be able to make judgments of people when they come into your orbit. You know, you just have to be able to. You gotta have that mentality where, you know, you just keep your eyes forward. Don't get caught up in things that don't really concern you. That's growing up in the streets of Brooklyn. You know, as a kid.
Crown Heights too.
Yeah, as a kid, you walk down the street and you might see somebody over there doing something, but that's not your business. You stay focused on what you're doing. Because you never know, even if you just turn your head a little bit to look, you never know how you get embroiled in that. So you just stay focused on who you are, what you're doing. You persevere. It's never as bad as people say. It's never as good as people say. That's it.
Good luck to you. It's been an absolute pleasure.